Hi, Frank Thacker here, and welcome to the Daily Peacemaker. Today we're going to look at steps 4, 5, and 6 of Kingian Nonviolence. And what we're going to do is share with you another one of our award-winning videos with myself and Madeline and Pam. So let's jump right into that. Share sound, optimize. All right, so go to files, we go to Google Drive, hit that, then you're going to go into Google Connect, and that will bring us up to the places where steps 4, 5, and 6 are resting. So we'll click on that, and anybody can see this, and this should get us going. Share screen, share sound, optimize the video, and share. And that, here we go.
So hello, everybody. The infamous trio is back to talk some more about the 6 steps. I'm here, Frank, with Madeline.
Hello.
Hi, and Pam. So, so some of you probably know, if you watched us before, that we recently did the first of the 6 steps, and now we're going to spend a little time talking about the 4, 5, and 6, the last 3 steps.
Frank,
so,
excuse me.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just thinking, maybe repeat that. It's the 6 steps of conflict resolution.
Yeah, I was going. Yeah.
Okay, just when we say steps, people.
Yeah, I was going to. Yes, you must have been reading my script.
Okay. I guess.
Yeah. So I was going. So some of you watched before. We went through the first 3, which are information gathering, education, and then personal commitment. So then the next negotiation and what are the next 2 that you guys are doing?
Direct action and reconciliation.
Reconciliation.
And negotiation you're doing, right?
Yeah. So I'll start with that. And as we pointed out last time, it's always good to remember these steps all kind of flow together and in and out of each other. So theoretically, you've got your information, you've educated, the necessary people, and you're really committed to seeing this process through. So negotiation is pretty much what it says it is, where you sit down with the other party and try to work out, not a compromise per se, but something that is maybe a new way of addressing the problem where both of you feel pretty good about it. And again, even though you've got a lot of your information and your commitment stuff, you have to remember that you need to be always open to getting new information, new education, and having to renew your commitment. So with the negotiation, and also even if you feel you're not quite prepared and the other party says, well, let's sit down and talk about this a little bit first. I think you should be flexible enough to do that, because you don't have to end up with the resolution at that point. You can always say, well, I've got to study this a little more or whatever, and we can come back. So you have to be flexible in these things. You also, it's really helpful if you know where the other side is coming from, what they really want, and what their agendas will be. And so there's a lot of back and forthness there with that. You probably want to meet in a neutral place, a safe place, rather than say you're dealing with the corporation going to their main office, and where they might not even ask you to sit down. But no, I shouldn't say that. That's not true. Going with good intentions. So, I can give you a quick example. We had another neighbor that wanted to do some stuff with the property that was going to call for a lot of variances. And I was opposed to that because one of the houses they wanted to build was about 10 feet from our property, which is all wood. So there's a lot of varying issues. But before they had to go to the town council and get the zoning and all that stuff approved. And there's these hearings. And, I showed up at the first one and never got heard. But I went over afterwards to the other party and said, let's talk about this. And they agreed to that. And without going into too much detail, I can add some stuff later. We worked out something between the two of us that was different from the original things that they wanted to do, but what we worked out was good for both of us, and all of the neighbors were involved too. So it's a negotiation is a complex thing. So have to be flexible. You have to be as well prepared as you can be, and very aware of other, body movements, facial expressions, feelings that go on, even with yourself and with the other party. And you're always looking for something that both people feel good about, and maybe even form some kind of connection between each other in the long run. So that's a thumbnail sketch of negotiations. So I guess the next is, who's up next?
Direct action.
Direct action. Oh.
Yeah. when negotiations doesn't work or breaks down, then the next step in conflict reconciliation would be to take direct action. And that can be many, many different forms. It could be as simple as, if you're doing this as a community effort, let's take, for example, what's going on right now in our culture with Black Lives Matter and our past experiences with civil rights and women's rights. They all use these methods to solve the conflict, to solve the problem. So you could say, starting with even leafleting.
That's a hard word to say. Passing out leaflets.
Handing out leaflets, which would be part of educating people, or picketing. I was thinking of when the schools went on strike as a teacher, it was the negotiations broke down and then the teachers went on strike. So strikes are another form of direct action. Demonstrations that we're seeing, marches, and then other forms of resistance. I'm thinking mainly like with the civil rights movement, sitting down in the diner or in the luncheonette and refusing to move, resisting that, whatever that is. And then finally, civil disobedience, which would be the highest level in which you decide that you're going to break the law and suffer the consequences to make your point. So it goes from a very simple level of handing out literature, picketing, or marching in the street, demonstrating in a nonviolent way. I think you have to be a little careful, though, that there are really two meanings to this. One is that you've decided to take responsibility to intervene in the situation, and you've decided that to begin constructive work by not waiting for someone else to do the work, but for you to physically put yourself out there. And two, when all else has failed, education, personal commitment, negotiations have failed, then you are going to try to resolve the problem in a direct action, which is very visible. It brings the problem from paper, private, to public. So it becomes it's almost like staging a street drama in a way. And it gets a lot of attention if you're doing like a demonstration or a march or a sit-in or a boycott could also be another form. I'm just thinking about that. It may not directly be out in the open. You may boycott a company that's doing something that, you feel is wrong by, not buying their products but trying to get other people involved. So there are over 200 techniques that could be used for nonviolent direct action. It's amazing when you think about it. So you could find that anywhere. Just put 200 techniques of nonviolent action into Google and you'll get a whole list of different things that you can do. So I find that direct action, if all else fails, that it is a good way of bringing public attention to a really serious issue. I'm thinking, can it be done in a individual way? Like if you're having a conflict with someone else, what would the direct action be? And I was thinking of kids who may decide that their parents are being unfair, for instance, and they've tried to negotiate and they've talked it over, and then the kids go on strike. They're not going to clean their room, or they're not going to come down for dinner, or I mean, there are stories about that actually, where young people have taken that kind of position. So it could be done probably on a personal level to a certain extent. I think the power, the people in power probably for young people and adults might be quite different. But I think it also, you have to be careful that the nonviolent, the form could be nonviolent, but you got to make sure that the way the issue is expressed is nonviolent. Like, what is the attitude of the people? What do the signs say? So you could say this is a nonviolent action, but at the same time, if you're not presenting it in a nonviolent way, for instance, some of the signs that Black Lives Matter sometimes are not nonviolent. They encourage, dissension and violence. So it's a very tricky, but I think it's important to realize that the action, the attitude of the people, and the message that you're giving also needs to be nonviolent. So,
can I jump in, because I think
Sure.
that point you made just then is extremely important about if you do any direct action, to be able to do it with an attitude of nonviolence. And the opposing party, it's not an adversarial. You don't want to take an adversarial approach to them, because then you've got them as an enemy. And there's an old saying I remember from the Kingian Nonviolence, and the goal is not to win. How do I get? It's not to win over them, but to win them over. So, and rather than you're not trying to conquer them and put them into place, but to get them to come over to see your side. So both people or both parties are working for the common good. But it's really a fine line or a delicate thing to balance on to that stuff.
I think Martin Luther King was very good at that, because he told people not to attack the person.
Yeah.
To attack the system, the policy, but not the people. Very hard.
Yeah.
But that's the difference,
And I'll add to that sometimes attacking the people takes your eyes off the prize. You start attacking the person and you forget the issue that you're actually working for. So if your language starts being about a person, you're not actually addressing the issue that you're fighting for. So it's not just, a generous spirited attitude. It is a strategic approach to solving the problem. Is don't attack the people, attack the problem.
Mhm.
not the people.
Yeah. And another point is, when one engages in direct action, the people that are involved in that, they really need to be trained, and how to remain nonviolent. I think some of the Black Lives Matter movements, the people are motivated by a good cause, but they're not well trained, and some of those things can erupt into violence, fairly easily. So you're going to do direct action, especially against a major institution or something. It's a hard thing, and you're always, even when you're in the midst of direct action, you're always willing to get back to the negotiation table.
Right.
And in fact, that's the point of the direct action, is to get back to the negotiation table.
Right.
Yeah,
you only go to direct action when you don't have the other party working with you to solve the problem. You go to direct action to force them to come back to the table with you to do a negotiation.
Yeah.
Well,
and solve the problem.
When the other party isn't even listening, like
Right.
with I mean, I'm sure a lot of work has been done way before Black Lives Matter to try to solve the problem under the table or with different groups. But then the real change hasn't been systemic. So, then it becomes something that you have to go in a bigger way to a more visual experience of the problem. So, but I think that the message could be lost if people aren't careful. And then you get people that maybe supported you at the beginning, but now are saying, no, wait, that's, so it is a very, very tricky thing. We have very good examples throughout history of how that has worked. So, but I think with the Black Lives Matter, like, people aren't trained as they were during the civil rights. So they just took to the streets without a lot of.
So I need to step into our talking about Black Lives Matter and how they're working with this problem, because number one, to the extent that we know anything about it, mostly what we know is what we see is presented to us on a screen or whatever. Certainly during the anti-war movement, during the Vietnam War, and during, the civil rights movement, the stuff that we saw on our television screens was carefully selected and designed to make certain people look like the enemies and certain people to look like the good folks. And I think we really have to be careful when we make assessments of how a particular movement is operating, to remember that most of our information is being selected, and that we're seeing what somebody has chosen for us to see. So I've also heard an alternate side to the Black Lives Matter movement, that it's really interesting that it has lasted as long as it has without imploding in the way that the civil rights movement imploded after Dr. King's death. And in fact, even before his death, it was starting to break apart into factions. And the Black Lives Matter movement continues to operate with its factions, but it's not shutting it down. There's still some forward movement going on with the Black Lives Matter movement. So, and I also certainly have the impression from Doc Lafayette and some other people who've gone in and talked and coached with people that have been leading the Black Lives Matter, so that Black Lives Matters movement, so that it's not like nobody's had any training. There's lots of people who have had training, and some of them are using that training and are very skilled in that training, and other people have chosen not to use that training and are approaching things in another way because they have another way of looking at the problem and feeling perhaps that they need to show another side beside asking politely. They need to provide something that says, listen, you got to deal with this problem and you have to deal with it now, because otherwise look what's going to happen here. So for whatever reasons.
Yeah, good point. The whole Black Lives Matter movement is very complex for sure.
Yeah.
And yeah, we get shown in the main media stuff that is sort of violent, because that's what people want to see, sad to say, or that's what attracts people. So, but so negotiations is can be a tough thing to deal with. You know, it does take that personal commitment. You know? So,
right.
But
and the direct action, it seems to me, kind of forces you back to that step of personal commitment.
Yeah.
If you're going to go to direct action, you have to ask yourself again, well, what am I willing to put on the line here to take this direct action?
Exactly.
And so I'm thinking again, just because I was so impressed with her story about the pediatrician in Flint, Michigan, who put her professional life on the line by, writing up her statistics. That was a form of direct action. She did the research, out in the world, and she tried to organize her argument in a way that was unassailable. And in fact, she did achieve that, but after a lot of hard work and some very capable people looking at her data. So before she wrote this report, she did everything she could to go through the usual means of solving the problem, but she wasn't getting anywhere. She didn't have a partner. So she used this report as a direct action to force them to come to the negotiation table. But it meant putting time and her reputation on the line. If she had done a sloppy job with that report, it would have been worse than doing nothing for herself and certainly for the cause. So
Pam, how do we reconcile after all of this?
Well, we're just all of these things we're talking about. I love this step of reconciliation, because it sounds like the birds are singing and the rainbows in the blue sky, and everybody's happy and we're singing Kumbaya and bowing with respectfulness to each other because we solved the problem and everything's fine. And actually, no, that's actually not how it works. Reconciliation, it seems to me, is when you're really in the weeds for creating the world you want to live in. So you may have gotten the details down on paper, and you may have had a court of law decide in your favor, whatever those pieces of power that you have been dealing with to try to get yourself to an agreement. But then reconciliation is living out that agreement. How do we work together to live out that agreement? So I think back to Dr. King's first, very public civil rights campaign, which was the Montgomery movement for integrating the bus system in Montgomery, Alabama. And they came to this fabulous agreement, thank you, Supreme Court ruling just in the nick of time. And then the Black people had to start riding the buses with all these white people in the community, including the bus drivers, who didn't really think this was a great idea. And so they would get on the bus and, some of the bus drivers were terrific, but some of the bus drivers were not terrific. And certainly some of the riders were not terrific. And so individual people had to be courageous enough to get on the bus and sit where they wanted in the face of insults or wisecracks or whatever, and choose how to respond in order to continue to move toward the world that everybody really ultimately wants to live in, virtually everybody, where people can get along. And a lot of people were not ready to take that step, and they had to be courageous in the face of resistance so that people would get used to this new world that they were living in. I have to I have to hand it to people who are willing to do that, because the insults that went their way, the resistance that went their way, they didn't deserve it. They've been honorable in their struggle, and yet they still had to absorb all of these insults and not react in a negative way, because they could, if they could undo the progress that had been made if it started to be a tumult again. So I don't know if that's helpful to think about, but I definitely want to clarify that it's not birds singing and rainbows in the sky. It really gets down to the nitty gritty of living it out in the face of continued resistance. And ultimately, the new normal occurs if the reconciliation is successful. But it takes something to get to the new normal.
Well, I think it takes a long time to achieve, and the door is open and then it closes, then it opens and it closes. It's not a straight line.
That's right.
And maybe some people never change their minds about how they feel about, the other side being able to be like them or whatever. So,
I'm thinking about as we're talking here, this whole notion of reconciliation, and a lot of the big movements like Black Lives or the Civil Rights, the changes were mostly will be legal, and that's a step, but how do I want to say this? It's hard to be reconciled just because someone passes a law. So it begins to filter back down to the individual people. So like Pam, how you mentioned where there were people of color that took the risk of getting on a bus, knowing probably on some level they were going to be made fun of in spite of the law. And then on the other side the two, there have to be people, I guess, in both parties, whether it's you and your neighbor or, some institution and the people that are thinking that institution isn't being just. There has to be people in both those places that are willing to reach out to each other and talk about it, to really be reconciled. So that comes back to the fact that, from my perspective, each of us has the ability within us to do something about issues, whether it's with your neighbor or with some larger group of people. We can, even if the laws aren't passed, that's okay. You can still, on your own individual, when you get a chance, connect or try to connect with the other people. Like going back to the Black Lives Movement, I know some of the people in the movement have been reaching out to different police departments, and some of the police in those departments have been participating in some of the marches and the demonstrations and stuff. So it's that personal commitment and connection, I think, that's going to move us forward. So,
and I think the least you could hope for is at least a civil relationship with the opponent. I have a neighbor like that who, he's very difficult to get to know or to have a relationship, but at least over the years we're civil to each other. Where there was a time when he would call and complain about everything, somebody drove on his lawn, somebody dropped the paper out the window, whatever. And now we have been able to, over the years, maybe I'm going to say I did more work than he did, but
we can say that.
Sometimes you have to do that. You have to give of yourself, and so now there's a much more, I feel, civil relationship, but it'll never be a real friendship.
Mhm.
So, that's.
Yeah. But
So
that's
Madeline, I, you're the one who knows because you have actually lived this out. But for myself, I want to always hold that miracles are possible,
mhm.
and stuff happens where people need each other or whatever, and who knows what's going to happen out of that. Now it can go in a negative way too. It's not like everything's inevitably going to be go in a positive way, but I think it's important to hold out that possibility for ourselves so that when we see an opportunity to go in that direction, it's more visible to us.
Mhm.
So,
Pam, you always have such good lessons for me.
Oh, I know.
I'll give
My
it a
children
try.
talk to me like that, Madeline. So,
Well, yeah, there's some people that, there's so much to do.
yeah.
Mhm.
You got to pick your
battles. It's not like
battles.
that.
And also, you're right, though. If there's an opportunity, always be open for that. I think that's true. Thank you.
And there's a lot of stories from the civil rights movement where, especially with some of the stories that Bernie Lafayette used to tell about, one time one guy came up to him with a knife and was ready to kill him. Well, no, it wasn't. It was someone else. And the person said, well, if you feel the need to do that, I'll be here to let you do that. I'm not going to fight you. And the person with the knife was like, what are you talking? It was like almost totally transformed in the moment. So that miracle, if you will, or that I see it as an exchange of energy that can really move a person. So lots of stuff that one can do on an individual level. So.
All right, we're going to end that there and come back here. And so, excuse me, that kind of wraps up the principles and the steps. So wraps up episode 6, in which there are 4 parts, each looking at the steps and the principles. So, and that's always going to be there on the website. So you can, if you watch these or listen to them, you can see that we've kind of, it's almost like a first layer of stuff in terms of going over these principles and steps and looking at them. We kind of, I guess, intermingle the personal and the larger scale type of stuff. So at some point, probably in the fall, would like to take some examples from everyday life and really examine those in the light of the steps and principles on the individual level, because the daily peacemaker is more focused on what you and I, ordinary people, can do in our everyday life to create that beloved community. So thank you for listening, watching, and as always, we would welcome hearing from you, and send us emails, call us. If you have examples of things in your life that you would like us to examine in terms of the steps and the principles, we'd love to do that. So we've got some other things lined up too, like the power and practice of nonviolence and that. So as always, thank you for listening. Great to be with you, and always hope to hear from you, and we will see you again soon. And I did remember to the idea of ending with a blessing, and this is from it's an Apache blessing. I'll just read it here. May the sun bring you new energy by day. May the moon softly restore you by night. May the rain wash away your worries. May the breeze blow new strength into your being. And may you walk gently through the world and know the beauty of all the days of your life. So we'll end with that, and peace to all, and hope to see you again soon. You take care.